In the rural American South, a mother discovers that her son will forever lose his sense of touch. Her last hug, felt in a body that no longer recognizes touch, moved even heaven. Amidst tears and prayers, God witnessed love that transcends physical limitations. A journey of unwavering faith that will forever transform your understanding of miracles. Prepare yourself for a story that will touch your soul. Subscribe, like this video, and comment where you're watching from to join this emotional journey. Dust devils swirled on the dirt road that cut through Hopewell, USA, as if announcing the arrival of something important. The sky, an almost painfully intense blue, seemed to curve over the valley, like a divine hand hovering over that small town in the rural American South. It was on a March afternoon, as the sun began to soften its heat, that Mary Johnson received news that would break her heart into 1,000 pieces. Ms. Johnson, there is no cure for what your son has. In approximately 2 years, Jacob will completely lose tactile sensation. The condition is rare, progressive, and unfortunately irreversible. Dr. Miller's office suddenly seemed too small. The white walls closed in on her as the doctor continued to speak, his voice now distant as if coming from another world. Jacob, sitting beside her, swung his legs that barely touched the floor, oblivious to the sentence that had just been pronounced upon his life. "Mom, can we get ice cream on the way back?" The innocent question pierced Mary like a spear. Ice cream. The cold on the tongue, the creamy texture. Sensations that her son would soon no longer recognize. How to explain to an 8-year-old child that his body would gradually close itself off to the world of senses? How to say that soon he wouldn't feel the warmth of a hug, the breeze on his face, the texture of sand between his fingers? Of course, honey. Today you can choose any flavor you want. On the way home, on the old scooter inherited from her grandfather, Mary felt her son glued to her back, his little arms tight around her waist as if already knowing they needed to memorize that sensation. The wind hit both their faces, and Mary swore to herself that this would not be the final sentence. Not for her son, not while she breathed. The unfinished brick house at the end of Flower Street seemed to greet them with a sadness of its own. That afternoon, the walls, which Mary dreamed of one day finishing painting, silently witnessed the daily struggle of a woman who had given up everything to raise her son alone. The photographs hanging told the story of an incomplete family. Mary and Jacob in all of them. Never the presence of Robert, the man who left when his son was only 5 months old. "Grandma always said that God writes straight with crooked lines," she murmured to herself, as Jacob ran to show his almost melted ice cream to the cat sleeping on the tattered sofa. Mary had been raised by devout grandparents in St. Mary's Faith, an even smaller town, where processions and novenas were the pulse of community life. On the improvised altar in the living room, the images of St. Francis of Assisi and Our Lady of Guadalupe, her celestial godmother, seemed to await an explanation for all that pain. What sense did it make for an innocent child to be condemned to live isolated within his own body? Night fell heavy, as nights often are when we carry news that we cannot share. After putting Jacob to sleep, Mary knelt before the small altar, the rosary between her trembling fingers. Is it punishment, isn't it? For dropping out of college? For disappointing my grandparents? For not being strong enough to bring Robert back? Tears flowed freely as guilt, that old companion, settled comfortably in her chest. If it's to pay for my mistakes, let it. Be on me, God, not on my boy. Dawn in the heartland never hesitates, not even for the heaviest hearts. With the first rays of sun, Mary was already on her feet, determined not to give in to despair. In the simple kitchen, she prepared cheese grits, Jacob's favorite breakfast, while mentally outlining what she would do next. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the house when knocks on the door interrupted her thoughts. "That doctor doesn't know anything, child. I felt in my heart that you needed me." Before her stood old Mrs. Betty, the 86-year-old neighbor, known throughout the region as the most powerful folk healer those lands had ever seen. Small, bent by time, but with eyes of a blue that seemed to hold all the mysteries of the world. "How did you know?" Mary asked as she let her in. "The little birds told me." The old woman smiled, revealing the gaps in her teeth. And Father John also told me that you left the doctor's office yesterday like a lost soul. Old Emu. Mrs. Betty sat at the kitchen table as if she had been invited to a royal banquet. Her hands, gnarled like ancient roots, held an embroidered cloth bag from which she pulled a small bundle of leaves. The world is much bigger than those medicine books, child. There are things that only someone who has lived 86 winters knows. It was that morning, with the sun drawing patterns on the kitchen floor through the curtainless window, that the first seed of hope sprouted in Mary's heart. Old Mrs. Betty spoke of herbs that grew only under the light of the full moon, of baths prepared with 7 different types of flowers, of ancient prayers that only the matriarchs of her family knew. Before I leave this world, I want to see your boy healed. It's my promise to St. Francis. The determination in the old woman's eyes was almost palpable. While they talked, Jacob appeared in the kitchen, rubbing his still sleepy eyes. Old Mrs. Betty watched him as if reading an open book. "Come here, child." She held out her wrinkled hands. Jacob approached without hesitation, as if recognizing an ally in her. "Do you feel it when I squeeze your little fingers like this?" "Yes, I feel it, old Mrs. Betty. But the doctor told Mom that one day I won't feel anything anymore." The simplicity with which the child recounted his sentence brought Mary to the verge of tears again. But old Mrs. Betty just smiled, an ancient wisdom stamped on her face. "And is the doctor God to know what will happen tomorrow? Not even the little birds know for sure if they'll return to their nest at the end of the day, child." That same afternoon, while Jacob was drawing in the yard, Mary made a decision that would change the course of their lives. In an old notebook with a faded cover, left over from her college days, she wrote on the first page, "Diary of Sensations, so you never forget how the world feels, Jacob." It would be a race against time, a battle against the impossible. If her son was condemned to lose his sense of touch, she would ensure he experienced as many sensations as possible before it was too late. From the warm sand of the beach between his fingers, which he had never known, to the icy touch of snow, which seemed an impossible dream for someone born in the heat of the heartland. But how to accomplish all this with the few resources she had? Mary earned a pittance as an attendant at Mr. Smith's pharmacy, barely enough for basic expenses, and the medications Jacob occasionally needed. The money saved in the false bottom of the chocolate powder can, her emergency reserve, would barely cover a trip to the state capital, let alone fulfill all the dreams that now swirled in her mind. Destiny, however, has its own plans, often incomprehensible to us. The next morning, while sweeping the sidewalk, Mary saw a car that did not belong to that reality. A silver SUV, gleaming and imposing, parked in front of her house. From the vehicle emerged a man she thought she would never see again in life. Robert. Chatter. Years after leaving only a note that said, "I wasn't born to be a father." There he was, older, his face more marked, a different look in his eyes. For a fleeting moment, Mary felt that same cold feeling in her stomach that she had felt at 23, when she first saw him at the Harvest Festival. "Mary." His voice was still the same, that deep tone that once made her heart race. "I'm back." The words that followed sounded like a poorly written movie. Regret, transformation, desire to regain his place, to meet his son, to form the family they should have formed years ago. Robert spoke of redemption as if it were a commodity that could be bought with beautiful words and the gleaming SUV. "You're 9 years late, Robert." She surprised herself with her own coldness. "And our son now has much bigger problems than the absence of a father." That's how Robert learned about Jacob's condition, sitting on the same tattered sofa where he had never sat before, hearing about a son he barely knew, and who was condemned to live a life without the comfort of touch. The man cried, and Mary couldn't tell if it was genuine remorse or the loss of his fantasy of easy redemption. "I want to help, Mary, really. I have money now, contacts. I've worked hard all these years in the United States. While your son was growing up without knowing who his father was. I know, and every day has been a torment of guilt." He stared at his own hands as if his confession were written on them. "Let me at least try to fix part of what I broke." It was old Mrs. Betty, who had arrived at that exact moment with a pot of lemon balm tea who interrupted the conversation charged with old grievances. The time to judge will come for all of us, on the day our souls are weighed. Until then, better to accept help when it appears at our door, even if it comes in the form of people who hurt us. Mary's gaze met that of the old folk healer, the wisdom of decades making her reconsider her stance. Perhaps for Jacob's sake it was worth giving a chance to that man who returned with belated promises. The days that followed were of intense planning. The diary of sensations gained pages and more pages of ideas. Robert, trying to make up for lost time, brought suggestions that reflected his new reality. We can take him to Disney. I know a ski resort in Vermont, proposals that sounded like they were from another world to Mary. He needs to feel simple things first, Robert. The texture of different plants, the sensation of dough between fingers, the warmth of a bonfire night. It was precisely during the preparations for the summer fair in town that the first small turning point happened. Jacob, helping to put up the colorful flags in the central square, suddenly stopped and pointed to the bonfire that the men were beginning to build. "Mom, I can feel the heat from here." Mary exchanged a confused look with old Mrs. Betty, who was supervising the work sitting in the shade of a mango tree. According to Dr. Miller, thermal sensations would be the first to disappear. However, there was Jacob, more than 15 feet from the still under construction bonfire, feeling its heat. "The doctor said this wouldn't be possible," Robert commented, perplexed. "Doctors know a lot, but they don't know everything," replied old Mrs. Betty, an enigmatic smile dancing on her wrinkled lips, "especially about the mysteries of the soul." That bonfire night, when the bonfire illuminated the faces of the gathered community, and the country dance music filled hearts of all ages, Jacob danced as if wanting to absorb every vibration of the music through his feet. Mary watched him, torn between renewed hope and the fear of nurturing illusions. It was Robert who interrupted her thoughts, offering her a glass of mulled cider. "I talked to some doctor friends in the United States. There's an experimental treatment in Miami. It doesn't promise a cure, but it can significantly slow down the process." Mary's heart raced. Miami was a distant world for someone who could barely make ends meet. How much does it cost? The amount mentioned by Robert made her knees weaken. It was more money than she had ever seen in her life. "I can pay part of it, Mary, but not all of it. I've invested a lot in my new business and I'm financially committed for a few months." The glow of the bonfire reflected in Mary's eyes, illuminating a determination that was born at that moment. If money was the problem, she would find a solution. There was no challenge too great when it came to Jacob. The next morning, still with the smell of bonfire smoke clinging to her clothes, Mary went to the main church. Father John greeted her with the affection of someone who had known her since she was a girl. "We're going to do a community effort, child. Like in the old days, when a house caught fire or a crop was destroyed by rain, the whole community would come together to help a neighbor in need." The word spread like wind through autumn leaves. In a few days, small Hopewell, USA was buzzing, with preparations for the biggest charity fair the town had ever seen. There would be 3 days of festivities, with typical food stalls, prize auctions, bingo, and musical performances. However, as in every small community, old rivalries and grudges soon emerged. The Johnson family, owners of the largest farm in the region and historically rivals of Mary's family, announced that they would hold a party on the same weekend, dividing attention and potential donors. "It's because of that old story between my grandfather and old Mr. Johnson," Mary lamented to old Mrs. Betty as they hung posters announcing the fair. "They never forgave Grandpa for winning the dispute over the water from the dam." The folk healer shook her head, a mysterious smile on her lips. "Rivalries are like knots in a fishing net. They seem strong, but with patience and the right fingers, even the tightest ones come undone." 2 days later, to everyone's surprise, Mr. John Johnson himself appeared at Mary's door. Tall, imposing even at 78 years old, he carried a carved wooden box. "My granddaughter Ashley had a rare disease as a child," he said without preamble. "They said she wouldn't walk. Today she runs faster than many kids out there." He extended the box. They said you're going to Miami to seek treatment for the boy. This is for the fair auction. It belonged to my grandmother. It came from Spain. Inside the box was a set of antique jewelry, certainly the most valuable piece that would ever be auctioned in Hopewell, USA. Even more surprisingly, Mr. John Johnson announced that the party on his farm was canceled and that the entire Johnson family would attend the fair. Some things are bigger than old fights, young lady. The fair exceeded all expectations. The central square overflowed with people, not only from Hopewell, USA, but also from neighboring towns. The jewelry set was auctioned off for an amount that, added to the other collections, guaranteed not only the treatment in Miami, but also a small reserve for other needs that might arise. The trip to the capital of Florida marked the beginning of a new phase. The medical center, with its aseptic corridors and state-of-the-art equipment, intimidated Mary at first. The team of doctors, led by Dr. Jane Doe, received them with a mixture of scientific interest and genuine compassion. The treatment is promising, but it requires commitment, explained the doctor. Jacob will need to come twice a week, for at least 6 months. Mary felt her stomach sink. 2 weekly trips to Miami were logistically impossible with her job at the pharmacy. I can bring him, offered Robert, who had remained silent during the consultation. I've rented an apartment nearby. I'm expanding my business to Miami anyway. The idea of Jacob spending so much time with the father he barely knew stirred a whirlwind of emotions in Mary. Jealousy, fear, resentment. But when she looked at her son sitting on the gurney with his legs swinging and his curious eyes exploring every corner of the office, she knew she had no choice. Twice a week, then. You bring him back the same day. Thus, contrary to all her expectations, Mary found herself forced to accept Robert's daily participation in Jacob's life. The first meetings were strange, filled with uncomfortable silences and superficial conversations. But gradually, a routine began to establish itself. Robert arrived punctually on Tuesdays and Thursdays, a man who now seemed to understand the value of responsibility. Jacob, initially shy, soon began to eagerly await these trips, always returning, with stories about what he had seen in the big city and the cool machines at the hospital. Today, Dad took me to a restaurant that has a wall made of water. You can feel the splashes on your skin, he recounted excitedly after the third treatment. That word, Dad, hit Mary like a punch to the stomach. Nevertheless, she couldn't help but smile at the sparkle in her son's eyes, a sparkle that had been scarce since the diagnosis. While the treatment in Miami continued its course, old Mrs. Betty was not idle. Every morning, even before sunrise, she appeared with some new infusion, a different ointment, a newly remembered prayer. The mixture of modern science and ancestral tradition became Jacob's routine. Her hands are warm, the boy commented one night, as Mary tucked him in for sleep. Even when she puts that cold stuff on my back, I feel the warmth of her hands. The observation swirled in Mary's mind. According to the doctors, Jacob's tactile sensitivity should be progressively decreasing. However, almost 2 months of treatment had passed, and the boy still perfectly distinguished textures and temperatures. It was during a pilgrimage to the shrine of Our Lady of Grace in the neighboring town that the second small turning point occurred. Mary had promised to take Jacob if he behaved well during treatments, and the boy kept his part with such dedication that even Dr. Jane commented on his exemplary discipline. The shrine was located on top of a hill, and the path was traditionally walked on foot by pilgrims, many of them climbing on their knees as a form of payment for promises. Mary did not expect Jacob to endure the walk, planning to carry him halfway. To her surprise, the boy insisted on going all the way on his own legs. "I want to show Our Lady that I'm strong," he declared, determination stamped on his sweaty little face. Upon reaching the top, after an hour's walk under the scorching sun, they came across the image of the saint, filled with votive offerings, small sculptures in wood and wax representing parts of the body healed by miracles attributed to her. Jacob was especially fascinated by a hand sculpted in cedar wood, so detailed that you could see the lines of the palm. "Can I touch it, Mom?" Mary nodded, watching as her son gently ran his fingers over the sculpture. At that moment, the old sacristan approached. "This hand has a special story, young man," he said, his voice marked by decades of rope tobacco smoke. "It belonged to a country musician who lost his movements after an accident. They said he would never play again, but after a novena to Our Lady, he not only recovered his movements but composed the most beautiful country ballad these lands have ever heard." Jacob's eyes shone with renewed hope. Without anyone needing to suggest it, he knelt before the image of the saint and closed his eyes, his lips moving in a silent prayer that only he and the Virgin shared. On the way home, something extraordinary happened. Jacob, who in recent weeks had been complaining of a constant tingling in his fingertips, one of the symptoms of the disease's progression, suddenly exclaimed, "Mom, the tingling stopped. I can feel everything normal again." Mary braked the scooter abruptly in the middle of the dirt road. She held her son's little hands in hers, hardly daring to believe it. "Are you sure, honey?" "Yes, I'm sure. It was right after I prayed to Our Lady. I think she listened to me, right?" That sudden improvement, inexplicable by the parameters of medicine, divided opinions. Father John saw in it the confirmation of the power of faith. Dr. Miller spoke of temporary remission and placebo effect. Old Mrs. Betty merely smiled, as if she had always known this would happen. And Robert, surprisingly, began to accompany his son to Sunday services, he who had never been a man of faith. Weeks turned into months, and life in Hopewell, USA acquired a new normality. Jacob continued his treatment in Miami, but now only once a week. Mary had managed to negotiate a flexible schedule at the pharmacy, allowing her to accompany her son on some appointments. The Diary of Sensations gained new entries almost daily, each celebrating a discovered texture, a preserved sensation. It was during the Harvest Festival period, when the community celebrated abundance with music, dances, and typical foods, that the first major turning point occurred. Dr. Jane Doe announced that the renowned Dr. Lee, a Japanese neurologist specializing in rare conditions, would be in Miami for an international conference and had shown interest in learning about Jacob's case. "It's a unique opportunity," explained the doctor on the phone. "Dr. Lee has revolutionized the treatment of sensory neuropathies in the last 5 years." The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Mary insisted on being present, even if it meant missing a day of work. Robert, who in recent months had been showing himself to be an increasingly present and responsible father, reorganized his entire schedule to be there too. Dr. Lee, a short man with precise movements, examined Jacob with impressive thoroughness. He used instruments that Mary had never seen, asked detailed questions about the evolution of symptoms, and carefully studied all previous exams. After almost 2 hours of evaluation, he addressed the three of them, Mary, Robert, and Dr. Jane, with an expression that mixed scientific curiosity and a rare glimpse of hope. "I believe there was an error in the original diagnosis," he declared, in English with a noticeable accent. "The boy's condition is indeed rare, but it is not the one we initially thought. Based on the new tests and the clinical evolution of these months, we are facing a much less aggressive variant. The progression should be considerably slower than predicted." "How much time?" Mary's voice came out almost as a whisper. "Instead of 2 years, we are talking about 4, maybe 5, and with proper treatments, some symptoms can be managed more effectively." That news transformed the desperate urgency that had dominated Mary since the diagnosis into a more calculated determination. 4 years meant more time to seek treatments, more time for Jacob to experience the world through touch, more time for science to advance. Robert, using his international contacts, gained access to alternative treatments that, combined with the traditional practices suggested by old Mrs. Betty, began to show promising results. Jacob kept a diary of his sensations, drawing colored hands on good days and gray hands on days when the tingling returned. In the 6th month after the initial diagnosis, during the celebrations of the town's patron saint's day, the third small turning point occurred. As a local tradition, the path where the procession would pass was covered with rose petals, forming a fragrant carpet for the image of the saint. Jacob, who was helping to spread the petals along with other children, suddenly stopped, his eyes, but with surprise, "Mom, I can smell the perfume with my fingers." The unusual statement attracted the attention of the adults around. Mary approached, confused. "What do you mean, honey?" "It's like my hands can smell the flowers. It's different from just touching, you know. It's like my fingers have a nose." Old Mrs. Betty, who was supervising the church decoration, smiled. Upon hearing the account, the ancients said that when we lose one sense, the others sharpen to compensate. Perhaps the boy's hands are learning to see and smell. According to the new diagnosis, Jacob should have already lost the ability to distinguish textures as subtle as rose petals. However, there he was, not only feeling them, but describing sensations that transcended common touch. Life, however, rarely progresses in a straight line. After a period of apparent improvement, when hope blossomed in the hearts of all who loved Jacob, came the setback. One August morning, the boy woke, unable to hold his cereal spoon. "I can't feel my fingers, Mom. It's like my hands are numb." Panic took over Mary. An urgent call to Dr. Jane, an emergency trip to Miami. Tests performed in a hurry. The diagnosis was devastating, a sudden acceleration of the degenerative process, mainly affecting the extremities. "This can happen," explained the doctor with genuine regret. "Even in the slower variants of the disease, there can be periods of accelerated progression." This third small turning point coincided with the severe drought that hit the region. The fields, once green and prosperous, now displayed a sickly pallor, as if the earth itself felt the pain of that family. The dam that supplied the town diminished every day, and water restrictions were imposed on all residents. Old Mrs. Betty, who knew the cycles of nature like the palm of her wrinkled hand, saw in this coincidence a deeper meaning. "The earth and the boy are connected," she explained to Mary, as they prepared a herbal bath for Jacob. "Both need renewal, new water to awaken the life that seems dormant but never completely gone." In local tradition, it was believed that the first rains after a prolonged drought brought special blessings. The water, considered purified by scarcity, itself carried healing properties when it fell for the first time after months of drought. It was during one of those rare and precious rains, after almost 3 months without a drop of water from the sky, that what many called a miracle happened. Mary was in the kitchen preparing lunch when she heard the characteristic sound of heavy drops on the tin roof. At the same time, Robert arrived with Jacob from the physical therapy session in St. Lucie, the neighboring town. Without thinking, twice guided by an intuition she couldn't explain, Mary ran outside and took Jacob in her arms. "Let's go to the square. Now!" Robert, confused but trusting her instinct, quickly drove to the central square. The rain was thickening every minute, and few were brave enough to venture out of their homes. In the center of the square, next to the historic cross that marked the town's founding, Mary placed Jacob down. "Hold your hands up to the sky, honey. Let the rain touch every bit of your fingers." The boy obeyed, his face raised to the laden clouds, his arms outstretched as if in supplication. Water ran down his face, soaked his clothes, and he remained still, like a small statue receiving a divine baptism. Suddenly, a smile lit up his face. "Mom, I can feel it. Every drop, one by one. It's like they're talking to my fingers." That moment, witnessed only by Robert, Mary, and a few passers-by who sheltered under the awnings of the surrounding shops, reverberated through the community as confirmation of a possible miracle. The rain, which for others was just the end of the drought, for Jacob represented the return of sensitivity that seemed lost. The days that followed brought a mixture of caution and renewed hope. Dr. Jane, a dedicated scientist that she was, resisted the idea of a miracle, seeking physiological explanations for the sudden recovery of sensitivity in Jacob's hands. Detailed tests showed a reactivation of nerve endings that previously seemed dormant. "It may be a temporary phenomenon," she warned, trying to moderate the family's enthusiasm. "We don't want to create expectations that may not be confirmed." Later, but for Mary, Robert, old Mrs. Betty, and the entire community of Hopewell, USA, the explanation didn't matter as much as the result. Jacob could feel again. Daily, he tested this newly recovered ability, touching different objects, exploring textures, recording everything in his diary with contagious enthusiasm. Upon completing a year since the initial diagnosis, during Lent, when the community practiced sacrifices as a form of devotion, came the fourth small turning point. An international scientific study, published in a prestigious medical journal, revealed that the specific combination of medicinal herbs similar to that used by old Mrs. Betty contained a compound that could stabilize neurological conditions like Jacob's. "See? I told you ancient wisdom wasn't superstition," commented the old woman, when Robert brought the news, printed directly from his office computer in Miami. "What we call folk healing, they call herbal medicine. The name changes, but the result is the same." The convergence between modern science and traditional knowledge opened new treatment possibilities. Dr. Jane, initially skeptical about old Mrs. Betty's teas and ointments, now asked for details about the composition of each mixture, recognizing that official medicine still had much to learn from ancestral practices. The following months were of relative stability. Jacob continued his combined treatment, sessions with Dr. Jane, specialized physical therapy, old Mrs. Betty's preparations, and more recently, a neurosensory stimulation program developed by Dr. Lee specifically for his case. Robert had become a constant presence, no longer just the father of Tuesdays and Thursdays, but a man genuinely committed to making up for lost years. He renovated Mary's house, hired a private tutor to supplement Jacob's education, and on full moon nights, took them both for short car rides through the heartland, gradually fulfilling the dreams listed in the Diary of Sensations. It was after 3 months of implementing this new combined treatment that the third major turning point arose, the most difficult of all. Dr. Lee contacted them with news that was simultaneously wonderful and disturbing. A research center in New York was developing a revolutionary treatment, with promising results in cases similar to Jacob's. The Japanese doctor had managed to include the boy's name on the list of patients who would receive the experimental treatment. "It's a unique opportunity," explained Robert, translating the doctor's email to Mary. "But it would mean spending at least a year in New York. A year in New York, a year away from Hopewell, USA. Away from old Mrs. Betty, Father John, from everything that represented safety and familiarity for Jacob. A year in a foreign city, with completely different customs and pace of life. I would go with him, of course," Robert assured. "I have the financial means for it now. You could visit us whenever possible." The proposal left Mary torn. On the one hand, the possibility of significant improvement, perhaps even a complete reversal of the condition. On the other, entrusting her son to the care of the man who had once abandoned them, however much he had proven his change in recent months. "I need to think," was all she managed to say, before retiring to the solitude of the yard where the stars seemed silent witnesses to her impossible dilemma. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. Sitting in the rocking chair that had belonged to her grandmother, she relived every moment since the diagnosis. The initial despair, the determination that followed, the small victories, the painful setbacks, the community coming together, Robert returning, Jacob bravely fighting against a destiny that seemed sealed. At dawn, still without a clear answer in her heart, she went to church. It was Sunday, and the first service would begin soon. The church was almost empty, except for a few elderly ladies who arrived early to secure the best seats, and the sacristan who was preparing the altar. Mary knelt before the image of Our Lady, and for the first time in a long time did not ask for a miracle. Instead, she asked for clarity, strength to make the right decision, regardless of what it was. Returning home, she found Jacob awake, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing with the intense concentration that only children can devote to an activity. She watched his little fingers holding the pencil firmly, drawing colored lines on the paper. Little fingers that, according to the original diagnosis, should already be completely insensitive by now. "What are you drawing, honey?" Jacob raised, his face a smile lighting up his features. "Our family. Look, Mom. You, me, Dad, old Mrs. Betty, and even Dr. Lee. I put everyone holding hands." In that childish drawing, simple but loaded with meaning, Mary saw her answer. The decision that seemed impossible to make became clear as the rainwater that had one day restored sensitivity to her son's hands. She needed to let him go. When she communicated her decision to Robert and called Dr. Jane confirming Jacob's participation in the experimental program, Mary felt strangely serene. She had cried all her tears during the night. Now, only the certainty of doing the best for her son remained. Preparations for the trip began immediately. Passports, visas, preliminary exams that needed to be sent to New York. Clothes suitable for a climate so different from the rural American South. The entire community mobilized again. Basic English. Lessons were organized at the municipal school. The owner of the clothing store donated a winter coat. Mr. John Johnson offered free transportation to the airport in Miami in his most comfortable car. It was on the afternoon before departure, when the suitcases were already packed and farewells were beginning to be said, that the moment that would give title to this story occurred. Mary's house was full. Neighbors, friends, Jacob's schoolmates, all wanting to give a farewell hug to the boy who, unknowingly, had united an entire town around his struggle. Amidst the confusion of voices and emotions, Mary retreated to the bedroom, feeling the weight of the decision finally made collapse on her shoulders. She would spend a year without seeing her son grow, without following his daily discoveries, without feeling his scent in the morning. The tears, which she thought she had already exhausted, returned with full force. That's when she felt small, hands touching her face, gently wiping away each tear that fell. Jacob stood before her, his brown eyes filled with a wisdom that transcended his age. "Don't cry, Mom. I'm going to get better and come back soon." Mary pulled her son into a desperate hug, as if wanting to merge their bodies and souls, so that nothing, not even an entire ocean, could separate them. It was then that Jacob said the words that would forever be engraved in the hearts of all who heard them. "Did you know that even when I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, I could still feel your hug? It's because a mother's hug isn't just with the body, it's with the soul too, and no disease in the world can take that away." That hug, witnessed by Robert, old Mrs. Betty, Father John, and so many others who had become an essential part of that journey, represented much more than a simple farewell. It was the materialization of love in its purest form, a love that transcended physical limitations and defied scientific diagnoses. A love that, as old Mrs. Betty would later say, even God stopped what he was doing in heaven to admire. The farewell at the airport was brief, to avoid prolonging the pain of separation. Mary gave Jacob a copy of the Diary of Sensations so that he could continue recording his experiences on the other side of the world, and a small bag of herbs prepared by old Mrs. Betty to keep his roots close to his heart. "Remember, honey, you're not leaving. You're just seeking another piece of the cure that started here, with our faith and our struggle." In the months that followed, letters and calls from Jacob brought encouraging news. The experimental treatment showed promising results. The boy had adapted surprisingly well to the new environment. Robert had proven himself a dedicated and attentive father. The photos showed a smiling Jacob, discovering the snow he had so dreamed of touching, marveling at the skyscrapers of New York and the rituals in ancient temples. Back in Hopewell, USA, Mary didn't stand still. With the support of old Mrs. Betty, and inspired by the international repercussion of Jacob's case, she founded an association for children with rare diseases in the region. The small support center, which started by serving only 3 families, soon became a reference throughout the state. "Each child who regains hope is a little piece of my son returning home before him," she explained, when asked where she got so much strength to help others, while her own pain of longing was still so alive. The story ends not with an ending, but with a new beginning. After 8 months of treatment in New York, Dr. Lee announced that Jacob could continue therapy in the USA, with periodic visits to the research center in New York. The news of the early return spread quickly through the town, and preparations for the reception began immediately. In the early morning before her son's arrival, Mary dreamed of her grandmother, who had passed away more than 15 years ago. In the dream, the matriarch smiled serenely, sitting in the rocking chair on the porch, and said in her gentle voice, "See, God writes straight with crooked lines. Sometimes what seems like punishment is just a different path to a greater blessing. When Mr. John Johnson's car parked in front of Mary's house bringing Robert and Jacob from the airport, all of Hopewell, USA seemed to be in the street. Colorful flags, the same ones used at summer fairs, decorated the facades of the houses. The municipal school band played upbeat marching band music. Old Mrs. Betty, more hunched but with the same bright eyes, held a bouquet of fresh herbs harvested at dawn. Jacob got out of the car and, ignoring the crowd waiting for him, ran directly into his mother's arms. Mary knelt to receive him, and when their bodies met in that long-awaited hug, a light drizzle began to fall, despite the almost cloudless sky, what many would later call a blessing rain. "I can feel everything again, Mom," Jacob whispered. In her ear, every little finger, every fingertip. The doctor in New York said it's almost a miracle. But Mary, Robert, old Mrs. Betty, and that entire community that had become a large family united by faith and solidarity, knew that there was no almost in that sentence. It was a complete miracle, built day after day by human hands guided by something greater than them all. A miracle that had begun with a mother's refusal to accept her son's seemingly sealed fate and culminated in that hug. The hug that, in the words of Father John in the following Sunday's sermon, moved even God himself, reminding him that a mother's love is the most powerful force that he himself created in this world.